Hello and welcome to Evidence Mastery. I'm Dr. Masoud Tusi. Today, we are going to dive deep into something called the record statement. Now, this is a really crucial reporting guideline, and it's completely changing the game when it comes to the quality and transparency of research that uses real-world evidence.
So what we're breaking down today is the full title. Get ready for it. The reporting of studies conducted using observational routinely collected health data, which thankfully everyone just calls the record statement. Now, keep in mind, this is an explainer, a summary. To get you started, I really encourage you to go read the full guidance from Benchmal and the team to get every single detail.
So here's what we've got on the agenda today. First, we'll talk about why this idea of routine data is suddenly everywhere. Then we'll look at how record actually builds on an older guideline called STROBE. After that, we'll nail down some key concepts, and then we're going to take a deep dive into the record checklist itself. Finally, we'll pull back and see what kind of impact all of this is having.
Okay, let's jump right in. We are living in an absolute explosion of data, right? And routinely collected health data, I'm talking about stuff from electronic health records, insurance claims, disease registries. This data offers some incredible opportunities. We can do research that's more efficient, on a massive scale, and way more cost-effective. But, and it's a big but, with this huge opportunity comes a really significant challenge.
And that brings us right to the heart of the problem, which, honestly, the authors of the record statement nailed. They point out that when the reporting is incomplete or just plain bad, it creates all these other challenges. Think about it. Poor reporting can hide biases, it can make it impossible for other researchers to replicate your work, and worst of all, it can lead to totally flawed conclusions. And that is the exact gap that record was designed to fill.
So you might be wondering, where did record come from? Well, it didn't just appear out of thin air. It actually builds on a really well-established foundation, something called the STROBE statement. Now, if you're in this field, you know STROBE. It's basically the go-to guideline for reporting any kind of observational study.
And this is a super important point. Record is an extension of STROBE, not a replacement. Think of it this way. STROBE gives you the general framework for any observational study. But record comes in and adds these very specific targeted items that you need when you're dealing with the unique messiness of routine data. Things like linking different databases, dealing with specific medical codes, and all sorts of data quality issues. All right, before we jump headfirst into the checklist itself, let's slow down for a second and make sure we're all on the same page with a couple of key concepts. Specifically, what is this data we're talking about, and what are the different population levels you need to think about? So, first things first, what exactly do we mean by routinely collected health data? Well, it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's any data that's gathered for day-to-day operations, clinical care, billing, insurance claims, but it wasn't collected for a specific research question in the first place. We're essentially repurposing this data for research, and that means we have to play by a different set of rules.
And this diagram right here, it illustrates this concept perfectly. It's what we call the population hierarchy. So that big outer circle, that's your source population. It's everyone you hope your findings will apply to. But then inside that, you have the database population. That's the group whose data is actually captured in the database you're using. And finally, that little circle in the middle, that's your study population. The very specific group you end up analyzing after you've applied all your inclusion and exclusion criteria. Getting these three levels straight is, well, it's absolutely fundamental. It directly impacts whether you can generalize your results to the real world.
Okay, with that foundation laid, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the checklist itself. And we're going to start right where every reader starts, the title and the abstract.
So right up front, record adds three really simple but incredibly powerful requirements. First, you have to say what kind of data you used and name the actual database. Second, you need to report the geographic region and the time frame of the study. And third, and this is a big one, if you linked different databases together, you have to state that clearly. Why does this matter? Because it gives your reader essential context right away. They can tell from the very first sentence if your study is relevant to them and start thinking about its potential limitations.
All right, now let's move on to the real heart of any research paper. And honestly, the section where record provides the most detailed guidance. I'm talking about the methods section. This is where transparency is everything. This table is a great way to see how record plugs right into STROBE, basically adding these crucial new layers of detail. For instance, STROBE has an item for participants. Record says, great, but we need more. You have to detail the exact codes and algorithms used to select that population. You have to reference any studies that validated those codes. And you have to show a flow diagram if you did any data linkage. Same thing for variables. It's not enough to just define them anymore. You need to provide a complete list of all the codes you used. This level of detail honestly is what separates a study that's just a black box from one that someone can actually understand and reproduce. Now, data linkage. This can be a really technical but absolutely critical step. So Record gives us a really clear 4-part framework for how to report it. Step 1. Just state that you did the linkage and at what level. Person, institution, etc. Step 2. Describe your method. Was it deterministic, probabilistic? Get specific. Step 3. Report on the quality of that linkage. How good was it? Did you validate it? And finally, step 4. Show your work with a flow diagram. And this is so important because just one little error in the linkage process could connect the wrong health records and totally invalidate your entire study.
Record also brings in some brand new items specifically for data management, stuff that you won't find in STROBE. Researchers now need to describe their level of access to the database, and they have to detail all the data cleaning methods they used. Why is this so crucial? Well, it ensures complete transparency. It shows the reader exactly how the raw data was handled and processed before any of the real analysis even started. This helps everyone understand where potential biases in data handling might have crept in.
Okay, so we've covered the methods. Now let's see how all these principles carry over into the results and discussion sections. How does Record help us make sure that the conclusions we draw are actually grounded in the data?
Well, in the results section, Record demands a super detailed participant flow diagram. It has to show exactly how many people were excluded at every single stage and why. Was it because of bad data quality or because the linkage failed? Then, when you get to the discussion, you have to explicitly talk about the unique limitations of using this repurposed data. You have to tackle the tough issues like potential misclassification or missing information head on, instead of just, glossing over them.
So, okay, we've gone through a lot of details here. Let's pull back for a second and look at the big picture. Why does all of this matter? Why is adopting this guidance so important for the entire field of real-world evidence?
It really boils down to 3 key pillars. The first is transparency. Record forces us to make the how of a study crystal clear. This transparency then leads to the second pillar, replicability, which is the absolute cornerstone of good science. And when you have those 2 things together, you get the third and most important pillar, trust. This is about building confidence for reviewers, for decision makers, and for patients that the findings we get from routine data are solid, robust, and credible.
So there you have it. We've covered the core principles and some of the most important checklist items from the Record statement. Truly mastering these guidelines is, I think, an essential step for anyone who's serious about producing high-quality research using real-world data. And for those of you who want to dive even deeper into this whole world, I want to mention a really useful resource that's coming up. It's my new book titled Real-World Evidence: Tools and Templates.
I've really designed it to be a practical, hands-on guide for professionals working in healthcare, pharma, and even regulatory bodies. It's scheduled to be released on Amazon in 2027.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. Thank you so much for joining me here on Evidence Mastery. Remember, applying these principles isn't just about ticking boxes. It's a huge step toward producing high-impact, trustworthy research that can benefit everyone.